Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be taking a look at For the Dungeon. So, For the Dungeon by Jordan Palmer was a Kickstarter I had backed a couple months ago. And the way I first became aware of this game was that I saw that Eric Bloat had backed it, and I got an alert because I follow Eric Bloat on Kickstarter. And so once I got the alert, I says, all right, let me take a look at this. So when I first saw it, the first thing I noticed was the graphics, and I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I kind of like the cover art, and it might not have been this actual picture that's up on the screen now. It was most likely this is the booklet here. So this is what I first saw. I was like, all right, that looks pretty cool. So then I started reading about it, and the story behind it is that For the Dungeon is a comedy role-playing game where you get to play as the hapless minions instead of the heroes. Experience the rush of unquestioning loyalty to a darker power and charging into danger with reckless abandon. Raid villages, scout ancient ruins for artifacts, and protect the dungeon from homicidal adventurers. Instead of a well-established world, the game uses principles taken from the Powered by the Apocalypse style games and improv comedy to create the setting. For the Dungeon relies heavily on player-created prompts that are interpreted by the game master to reveal the details of the world. The game is designed to be fast-paced, with a focus on creating memorable moments. Because the game is light and has a greater focus on the story, anybody can pick it up and play with minimal effort. The fun is created more through the unexpected scenarios the players get themselves into rather than the studying of rules. So it's meant to be a very rules light system. It's meant to be a very comic relief from the very occasionally serious nature of adventuring and worrying about being successful. In this case here, you have just as much fun, if not more fun, from your character's mishaps, because that's kind of what they're supposed to do. So I'm going to jump right into it and start taking a look at it. But it was certainly an interesting concept and something that I said, you know what, I think I'm going to back this. And I looked at the various levels to back it, and I backed it at the $16 level to get the soft cover plus the PDF. So that's what the Kickstarter was for, and then the $3 or something along that lines of shipping and handling. So I will say this: when I first got the book, and it came along with several other packages in my mail. And so I had one small envelope, and out comes the book, and it's fairly thin. All right, you can see here that it is only some 40 some odd pages long. And when I first got it, I was like kind of shocked at how small it was. And I actually ran back to my Kickstarter and I was like, let me see how much I paid for this thing. And then when I realized that I paid, total of $19, I was slightly disappointed. I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a small little booklet. And looking at the typeset, the print inside, which I'm going to do right now, you'll see that it further, led to that, wow, this is kind of small content-wise for what I had paid for it. Let me come here, and so here's the actual book. And you can see that the introduction here, I mean, the artwork is really cool. I really like the artwork. The book itself is a high quality, cardboard, glossy pages, fairly thick. And you can see the writing is, it's a large, easy to read font, which kind of led me to that, drawing that conclusion. I was like, well, it's kind of short, you know, for, for a $19 price tag. But as I started reading through it and seeing how the system actually works, it started to grow on me, and I started, reconsidering that initial thought about it, to the point now that I'm actually quite happy with it. And, there was just that initial, you know, um, shock of how short it is, but it does a lot in few pages. So, so the rules, you're creating your character, you decide your character's traits, their triggering moves. So these are moves, are the basic ways actions are resolved in the game. Essentially, they help you keep the story moving along. So there are triggering moves, and if the game master decides to give an action in a particular easy or hard, they may add or subtract from the dice rolls to see fit. You're basically rolling d6s. And when you're rolling a d6, as it says up over here, player takes the highest dice roll of their roll. So if you roll a 6, it is a success. And in many cases, you're going to roll 2 dice, or at the maximum, like 3 dice. And for every 6 you roll, there's a success. For every 1 you roll, and you'll see there's a critical failure. And so if you roll a 3 or less, it's a failure. The game master gets to make a move against you instead. All right. There are 6 basic moves that a player can trigger. There's avoid damage. There's cunning ploy. There's getting violent. There's looking around. There's don't get caught, and there's talk it over. Critical failures. Any time that you roll a 1, if any of your dice have a 1 on them, you critically failed. The game master will ask for a single word prompt to establish the details. They will then use that word as inspiration for how things get dramatically worse. So it's kind of like the player will give these, these one word prompts, or these very, very short prompts, and then the game master will take that and try to spin that into a story about your character's failure. So it really is very interactive between the players and the GM, through the actions and the successes and failures of the character. So I really like that kind of exchange, and the player providing a prompt for a failure. And it reminds me very much of some classroom exercises with young children, and asking the children to talk with each other and to discuss these various, really role play with a story that they might be reading, or something. And that's what really started to appeal to me, is that this game is very kid friendly, in that it mirrors a lot of what they're, how they're taught in schools, in some cases, with interacting with fiction stories and such. So moving on, every character has up to 5 Zeal Points. These may be spent to change any roll into an automatic success. Zeal never replenishes for the character, and when they're out of zeal, their service may soon come to an end horribly. So every character starts with 5 zeal, which basically means they basically, during the course of their adventuring, they will have 5 chances to re-roll, or five critical failures to, erase and become a success. Once those are gone, your character is most likely going to fall prey to either harm or even death. All right, so when a character is injured, they receive 1 harm and roll a single dice. If they roll greater than the amount of harm your character has, then they survive. Otherwise, they die spectacularly. If you still have zeal, you may spend it to keep yourself from dying. So every character has a number of, health points. In most cases, the player characters are going to have 2 health points. So if they so they have to roll above a 1 or a 2 in most cases in order to survive. And if they roll below that, they obviously, lose a health point first, and then the second time that happens, they'll actually die. There are items in the game, and there's 3 different categories of items: mundane items, minor items, and then major items. There's making moves, so this is where the players are deciding what kind of move they are going to attempt, so they can avoid danger. Cunning Ploy, to avoid danger is kind of self-explanatory. So they roll a d6. For every roll of a 6, you pull it off. A 4 or 5, the game master will tell you what it will cost you to succeed. Cunning Ploy is when you make preparations to attempt to create an advantage. Make a roll on a 6. You temporarily create a new scene or a new scene trait. On a 4 or 5, the trait can only be used once and must be used immediately. All right, so yes, there's traits that your character has, and sometimes these traits, they can always call upon. Other times, there's a limited amount of uses for those traits. There's getting violent, which basically means attacking. When you use force against someone, you make a roll. On a roll of a 6, you choose 2 of the following. On a roll of a 4 or 5, you choose 1. You could not take damage. You can deal harm to them. You can get them out of the way, or you could take something from them. So you can imagine if you roll a 6, you get to do 2 of these. You can harm them and not take harm yourself during that combat round, and that's usually enough to kill your opponent because they only have 1 harm point to their survivability. Looking around, obviously, you're rolling the d6, and for every 6, you're going to see what you're looking for, what is dangerous here, what is valuable here, what has recently happened here, and what is hidden here. Taking it over, when you ask something from someone willing to listen, make it roll on a d6. All right, roll of a 6, you convince them to help you. On a 4 or 5, they demand something more in return, and so on. So making your character, so there's a section, and it's not a huge section, a couple pages long. So your character perks. So every character starts with some perks. All right, perks are things that make your character special. They tend to define the way your character interacts with the world. Perks may offer characters special abilities, new ways to interact with basic moves, or entirely new moves that only they can use. Players choose from any of the following. So they can choose their perk is going to be either Mayhem, Berserker, Slippery, Curious, Hoarder, Dabbler, Leader, Mastermind, Distraction, Reckless, Skilled, Protected, Tough, or Grovel. There are custom perks. Sometimes you'll want to create a custom perk that fits your character specifically. This could be because none of the other perks provided fit your character. And it's a decision between the player and the GM in doing that. So the book goes on, and it describes a first session and how things are basically used in the game. what occurs between sessions. So your characters do exist outside of the session itself. Some of the things that they can do is to raid a village, to meddle with magic, or to send a scouting party out. The Game Master responsibilities are laid out here on pages 30 and so on. So there are three things the Game Master is responsible for. Gaming principles are all about what happens within the game. Narration principles describe the world and the action, and then consequences are things that should be done when the player fails a roll. All right, so finding play to find out is a gaming principle. Setting the scene and consequences. So consequences can range from a variety of things, but they're generally speaking, they remove a scene trait, they use the action against them, take an opportunity away from them, harm them or something they care about, warn them of impending danger, hit them with danger, or increase their notoriety and force a roll at the session end. All right, so, and then it details how each one kind of works out. So increasing their notoriety. When word gets out back to the wrong people, the chances of an adventurer coming for them gets bigger. When this move is used in a session, they need to roll to see if an adventurer comes after them, whether they raided a village or not. If they also raid a village, that you make the roll twice to see. So when adventurers come, the adventurers are going to actually enter into the dungeon, and they represent a much greater threat to the player characters than them just going out and doing their raids or what have you. So an adventurer, as I stated earlier, adventurer comes in and they generally have 2 harm, so the same as a player character, and they're just much tougher. They have some of the same kinds of traits and such. So they could be adventurers never run unless they have taken at least 1 harm. The list of adventurer stunts are as follows. They could be armored. They could have surprise. They could be a thief. Vengeance, disguise, annoying, mobile, hidden, counter, dangerous, observant. So dangerous characters who attempt any move other than get violent take harm unless they succeed. So when you're challenging an adventurer, and that adventurer has that dangerous trait, it just increases the chances of becoming harmed against them. Judgment calls of the GM, helping create characters, and then there's a section on the example of play. So you can see it is a very well thought out game system, simple in the way it's doing. Once you create your character is going to have its perks, its harm, its zeal, its talents, its tools, its motivation, and then its experience. I didn't go very much into the character sheet. So the talent is what they start off with. The tool that they have, so the tool could be whatever piece of equipment that they have that actually helps define them in some way. So their tool could be a shovel, or their tool could be a weapon. So the tool is actually going to create some of those single word prompts that allows the GM to see, well, how does this this tool and this ability, how does that word prompt help kind of create the story about what they're actually doing, and then the motivation of the character. What are some of their motivational aspects that will help craft this story and the adventure as it goes on. So there you basically have it as far as the booklet is concerned. Now, you you know, there's one other minor criticism, and that's the way that the character sheet is in the book. It kind of makes it very, very difficult to make a copy of this without having to split this binding. You can see that just the way that it's cut. So that's one thing. I think it would have been more beneficial to have the character sheet on the back of the booklet, which I've seen in some other books, and then you could have this description on the inside cover instead. That way you could just flop the book down on your copier and just make a character sheet. However, the character sheet do come in the PDF, so you can always print them out. And one thing I didn't show you, actually, I should, is that there is a handy chart in inside the booklet that kind of lays out getting violent, don't get caught. So it kind of makes it a quick reference for both the players and the GM to have on the table, and that can also be printed on the PDF. So the PDF came with 3 other files. One is the for the dungeon character sheet. Sorry, I couldn't think for a second. One interesting thing, when you print it off the PDF, you're going to see how it gets cut off here. It's not exactly lined up with your standard margins, so you're going to have to go in there and readjust the margins. And that's the same with the quick reference as well. You can see it's cutting off everything because it just wasn't, it didn't have the right margin settings, so you can't just jump right in and print it. You're actually going to have to go in there and alter it. There's also a nice little map that came in there as well. Now, I don't really see how the map works, so what you actually do with this, other than just to have something and you can help tell your stories, so your particular group of minions can live in this swampy area over here, and then you can just kind of expand their adventuring out. But the map itself is not referenced in the book at all, so it's just an added supplement with no needed explanation, and you basically can tell your own stories about the game system. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I got over my initial misgivings about it, and even though there's a few little things that you have to tweak, like say copying from the PDF, those additional pages, it looks like it's going to be a really fun game to play. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, I encourage you to go take a look at it. And obviously the Kickstarter is over, but you can certainly go in there and see where you can pick one of these up on. It was not on drive-through, so I got it separately just through the Kickstarter. But I'm sure if you look on the internet, you can find where to purchase one of these yourself. So thanks for joining. I hope you liked the video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'm very, very close to 500 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Share the video if you liked it. I'm going to put it out onto a few sites that I go to normally. So I'm going to put it out there on Twitter and on Facebook and a few communities in Facebook. And happy gaming out there. It's a holiday tomorrow, so if it's a holiday for you tomorrow, enjoy your day. And this upcoming weekend, I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You all have a good evening.